They made 96 of these 1970 Olds 442 W-30 4-speed convertibles, but this is one of the only ones to ever leave the factory with a particular option, and we'll show you what it is. Sometimes the life story of these muscle cars is just as fascinating as the car itself. And in this case, we have a car that is not only very unique and special, but there's also a very interesting story that's documented and well known that goes along with it. This car, it's a 1970 Oldsmobile 442 convertible with the W-30 engine option and a factory 4-speed, is one of only 96 ever built. And the way it came to be is that it was special ordered in October of 1969 by a guy named Robert Casley, whose nickname was Rug, because his friends were giving him a hard time about his receding hairline and that he wouldn't wear a toupee, so they just called him Rug. Anyway, Rug came back from Vietnam and he really liked these cars, so he ordered one in October of '69. It had to be galleon gold, 442, 4-speed convertible. No stripes, no fancy wheels, just a gold ragtop that went fast. And it took Hansel Oldsmobile in Fullerton, California several months to get the car. There's a side story that the car that arrived was incorrect. He got a hardtop instead of the convertible. But he refused that one. They reordered. In comes the convertible around March of 1970. However, it wasn't exactly right again because it had black stripes on it, which he did not want. But he knew what a hassle this was, so our friend Rug decided to accept the car and go enjoy it. And it is a very cool option car. It has that 370 horsepower W-30 455 under the hood, the Muncie 4-speed close ratio transmission. One of the most unique options is an aluminum rear axle carrier assembly called the W-27 option. This is believed to be one of only a couple documented W-30 4-speed convertibles that came from the factory with the W-27 rear axle option. It's also got a stereo tape player, white interior, just a nice car. Unfortunately, Rug couldn't keep up with the payments and the car got repossessed. So it eventually ended up in the hands of another local couple, George and Betty Steele. And Betty actually drove this car as her daily driver for many years throughout the 70s. And Betty's boss, a guy named Lee Pearl, who was an Oldsmobile fanatic, eventually offered to buy the car from her. So she sold it in 1977 with 71,000 miles for $600. It's amazing to think a pinnacle muscle car going for 600 bucks. Now the car was not in perfect shape. It had been driven a lot and it was in need of a restoration. But an interesting connection was Lee's mailman was also Rug's mailman from a few years ago. And the mailman, his name was Bob, and he came by one day and he said, "Hey, I think I know that car." So he put Lee and Rug, the original owner, together, and they ended up exchanging paperwork. So Lee ended up with the original bill of sale, the original order sheet, all kinds of original documentation, which only makes this car that much more special. And it eventually went to level 1 restorations where they did a complete a concourse quality restoration on the car to bring it to the condition that you see here today. It's just a beautiful, beautiful car, and the fact that it has the rarest 1970 W machine options and features makes it just an over-the-top car. So aside from having a cool story, I mean, this is just a cool car in general. It's a 442, which means it's a high-performance version of a Cutlass, sway bars, performance suspension, box lower rear control arms, rear sway bar, disc brakes, and then they added the W-30 engine package, which is the 455 cubic inch V8. The W-30 adds a special F casting cylinder head, larger intake and exhaust valves, higher flow port design. It's got an Oldsmobile cast aluminum intake manifold. It's got a special camshaft that's got much more duration on both intake and exhaust. Also a higher lift unit, specially tuned carburetor. So it brings the power level to 370 over 365 for the non-W30s, which delivered 500 foot-pounds of torque through a close ratio Muncie 4-speed transmission. The engine breathed through a free-flowing dual exhaust system, and the power was put to the ground through the W-27 aluminum carrier and aluminum cover rear axle assembly. The center of this thing is aluminum. Of course, you've got steel axle tubes and cast iron gears, but it was a much lighter piece. It's a 391 rear gear in the car, and apparently there was between 350 and maybe 400 of these W27 rear ends ever made. So that rear axle assembly on its own is worth a whole bunch of money. The rest of the car has a beautiful restoration, a lot of cool options inside. Back in 1970, you could go to your dealer and personalize the car you wanted by pre-ordering it. This one has some interesting options. It's got bucket seats and the 4-speed, but it does not have a console on the floor. But it does have an under-dash 8-track player, along with an AM radio in the dash. Of course, the full complement of gauges, including the clock with the tach built into it. So it's interesting to see how the original owner who ordered this car picked what he picked. Wonder what is on this 8-track labeled Oldsmobile introductory tape cartridge. Selections: Klaus Ogerman with the Watusi trumpets, Edie Gourmet, Tonight I'll Say a Prayer, Peter Nero with The World Needs Now Is Love. So these are like cover versions of popular songs from 1970. You know, I bet this was never even played. That's why it's here now. Not sure anybody would want to listen to that. But it is stereo in a car with an AM radio. It's kind of interesting. This 442 has the fiberglass outside air induction hood, and it's interesting because we have all the documentation from when this car was ordered, and it was ordered with the galleon gold paint and white interior, but the customer did not want the black stripes. He didn't order them, but when the car arrived at the dealer, it had the black stripes. So it became part of the story of this car, and it makes for an interesting and pretty rare 3-color 442. And there was some discrepancy on if they were going to put the stripes on this when they restored the car, because the original owner didn't want them. However, the car was originally delivered with the stripes, so the black stripes went on along with the stunning galleon gold paint job. It's got 14-inch wheels with the poverty caps, you know, the dog dish hubcaps. Just a great looking car, but an interesting tri-tone between the gold, white top, and black stripes. This is just one of the great muscle cars and muscle car stories in the Brothers collection. Cars like this are just unbelievably interesting and cool to look at all by themselves, but when you know the history and hear the stories behind them, well, they become that much more interesting. And this one's got a lot of pictures on our Muscle Car of the Week website that you can check out, musclecaroftheweek.com. And we've got the Facebook page where you can share cars like this with all of your muscle car friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel where you'll never miss an episode of Muscle Car of the Week.